Good morning, everybody. Just in case you've come on to a screen with silence on it, we're just waiting for the participant numbers to go up to the number registered. So bear with us for perhaps another minute. Okay, we'll get started. I expect the numbers to continue to increase, but just to keep in tow. My name is Brian Hyland. I'm Commercial Director with Morgan McKinley in sunny Cork at the moment. I'm also Vice President of the ERF, and you're all very welcome to this morning's event on 7 tips in creating a contractor temp desk. Firstly, the formalities is to thank our special guests. We have Jean O'Donovan, Deputy Managing Director of Brightwater. Jean is responsible for Brightwater's accounting division, over 20 years experience in the Irish and international markets, and recruits for senior finance, qualified accountants, professionals seeking permanent interim contract or temporary assignments across all sectors. Stephen Daly is Director and Principal Consultant with OLIS Recruitment, with 18 years experience recruiting in the IT and business change markets, with an excellent track record of delivering for blue chip companies and SMEs alike. And Jennifer Doyle is Commercial Director with Contracting Plus. Contracting Plus is our leading provider of contracting solutions with focus on personal and proactive advice. Contracting Plus helps professional contractors get started on their contracting journey and maximize each new role. To continue with the formal piece, just particular thanks to Contracting Plus for making this and many other breakfast briefings possible through their generous sponsorship. So Jen and Jimmy, many thanks. As you know, Contracting Plus are key partners for many of our members involved in the contract recruitment. They organise set up for your candidates within the hour, including insurances, so they can go on site with your client the same day. So if you're in the contract recruitment market, make sure you give Jen, Jimmy, or the team a shout. In preparing for this morning's event, I did an unusual thing. I looked up what the definition of temp and contractor were, because we can't assume that everybody on the call understands the difference between both. And we have colleagues and peers who perhaps are venturing into the temporary contract space for the first time. So a temp is defined as a temporary employee, typically an office worker who finds employment through an agency, which is good news. A contract is a person or firm that undertakes a contract to provide materials or labour to perform a service or to do a job, again, which is good. Again, to frame the market, 72% of organisations report that 10% of their workforce are freelancers or contractors. 77% of clients expect new contract roles to increase or remain at current levels this year. And 78% of contractors choose to work as career contractors. So we know that engaging contractors immediately widens talent pools and opportunities for both talent and organisations. So that's just to frame it. The running order of this morning is Jean's going to talk us through managing a temp desk and all the intricacies that are associated with a temporary market. Stephen's then going to delve into the contractor space, explain the difference between both, and also then how to grow a contractor market. And then Jen is going to wrap it all up by way of the support that contractors receive through Contracting Plus and the type of services that are available to ensure that we're supporting them as best we can in that market. So again, thank you all three for joining us this morning. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Jean. Thanks,
Great.
Brian.
Yeah, great. Thanks a million, Brian. And really, like I suppose, coming into the type of market we're in at the moment, there are so many benefits to setting up and running a temp and contract desk. So what I'm going to do this morning is, I suppose, give you an idea as to why you would look at a temp desk, outline the benefits from a client perspective, look at some of the ways you would tackle it as well from attracting candidates, marketing a temp desk, and then some of the maintenance and administration that would go along with running a temp desk. So the first reason as to why you would run a temp desk is very simple. You have recurring revenue on a monthly basis. This can't be underestimated. You are going into your month with a day book that could be 5, 10, 15, 20K. To give you kind of a very kind of specific example on that, if for example, for an accounting professional, your average margin on an accounting professional could be approximately €250 per week. So if you have 10 workers out, you're going into your month with 10K. So that's kind of the way that you need to think about it. It's also very fast paced. There is a lot of quick turnaround with temping. And as a business, you're offering a really broad solution offering. So you need to think about it from your business perspective. You are keeping both the permanent and temporary business within your own organization. So from a client perspective, sometimes clients won't know what temp and contract work is. There can be sometimes a myth that, oh, what is it? I'm not familiar with it. So it's really important that you would educate your client as to why you would take on a temp and contractor. So what I would say in relation to this, the first thing I would do is I would go and align it with your current business. So look at where your specialisms are, be that accounting, life science, IT, engineering, whatever your specialism is. Look at the clients that you're currently working with, and you can approach them from a cross-selling perspective. Okay, so you can approach them and say, listen, would you be interested in looking at taking on staff on an interim or temporary basis? I would definitely go to your open permanent roles to start with, because these are where your clients' pain points are. There is somebody that's either leaving that business or, even worse, not in that role at the moment. So you can come and you can add an immediate value. When you're hiring a temp person, I think kind of the main thing is you would have somebody in place very quickly. So it's kind of speed to response. There is a lot of flexibility for clients when you're hiring temp and contractors. So there's no long-term commitment. They get to essentially try somebody out before they have to commit to them on a long-term basis. There is also the added value that they're not on your headcount. So again, huge. I mean, like a lot of companies, especially larger multinationals, they may not be able to take on additional staff, but they still need the work done. So the temp is on your headcount. And then obviously you're offering payroll services. And then for some clients, you could offer the RPO, project management services, where they may be lacking a team or assisting with a project. So that's kind of what I would say from a client perspective. What I would say it's a very proactive BD strategy as opposed to a reactive BD strategy. It's rare that you'll ever see temp and contract roles advertised. That's because they move so fast. So you have to be on it. You have to know what clients would take on contractors, and it's about you approaching them with available candidates, which work very much in tandem. So when you're working from the candidate perspective, like this is huge. You can learn so much from a candidate CV. If you're looking at somebody who's been temping for the past 4 to 5 years, there's 4 to 5 leads straight away on their CV from previous clients and where they've worked, etc. So what I would advise anybody to do who's starting off a temp is get candidates who are available immediately or coming out of contracts, building up kind of leads from there. Where have they worked? Talk to your candidates. Who do they report into? They're a really minefield of information. Get them on your side. You can identify who they contracted with, and you can then build what I would call your hot list. So your hot list of clients and your hot list of candidates from there. And another thing that's really prevalent in the temp and contract side is keeping your traitor list. And this would be a word I think that, oh God, has probably been I learned it when I first started in recruitment about 20 years ago. But what this means is this is where you have temps or contractors temping that you don't have the business on. So these are all clients that you can approach. So that's what I would say kind of from a client and candidate perspective, very much finding business on a proactive basis. Bringing it back then with the era that we're in now, with any type of business, like social selling and marketing is imperative. So you need to productize your solution offering. Like, for example, in Brightwater recently, we've launched our flexible hiring solutions. So that we have obviously productized this so clients know exactly what they're getting when they're coming looking for a temp. They know what the benefits are, they know what it's going to entail, and they know what the service is. Other than that, I would say keeping your LinkedIn and your social media up to date. If you've candidate client testimonials, these are great to get out there. People will know that you are a temp and contract recruiter. Obviously posting industry related content, advertising your roles, just keeping it varied, but become known as a specialist within your market. So that's kind of a brief kind of whistle tour from a candidate client and I suppose a marketing perspective. But what is very important as well when you are looking at temp and contractors is the maintenance of them. So you are the employer. So if a candidate is on a visa, you need to check that their visa is valid and that it's on date. You need to complete references on your candidates, and you also need to ensure that if they have the specific qualifications. For example, if it's a qualified accountant, that you have viewed their qualified accountancy license. There's also the concept as well, which is important when you're building up a temp and contract desk, of looking at starters and finishers. And the reason I say this is because temps don't last forever. We wish they did, but they don't. So you are going to have people who are going to be finishing. So in order to have, say, 10 temps out, you may need to fill 15 roles, so it's really keeping in touch and keeping that aftercare with your candidates. I can't emphasize this enough. Once somebody goes into an assignment, it's really, really key that you absolutely keep in touch with them, find out how they're getting on, and they are mindful of information. You'll find out who else is contracting there, who else they have in the business, and you'll get referrals through this basis. But that's probably pretty much it, a whistle top on temps. Stephen, I know you're going to kick on now and go into the contractors. I would think kind of from a top tip wise, I would just say stick with it. It can be a slow build, but it's absolutely worth it, and be resilient with it. And I would say the proactive business development would be absolutely key. Thanks, guys.
Jean, brilliant. Thank you so much. And just before we dip to go to Stephen, I should have highlighted on the Q&A session. We're going to do two things in the Q&A. There's capacity at the end of the screen. If you want to pop a question in, please do, and we'll get around to it at the end of the session. In advance, a couple of people popped questions through, and I've got one or two for Jean now that I think would be beneficial.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things. You spoke about hot lists.
Yes.
How does one build a hot list? Go back and expand on that for me just a little bit, so people understand the language and the acronisms that are used.
Yeah,
in
no
the
problem.
space.
So depending on what your CRM is, a lot of CRMs currently will have a facility for you to add a hot list function. And this is when you speak to client A and the client A takes on temp and contractors, you can add them to this hot list. Similar, and I would say similar from a candidate perspective, it's really important because it's so fast paced that you have your list of candidates available. If you don't have it from a CRM function, I would say kind of a whiteboard or, kind of keeping an Excel spreadsheet. But these are just literally, so I have candidate A, they have strong accounts payable experience, they're available immediately. I know company A, B, and C take on accounts payable people. I can go to them straight away because it's all speed of response when it's coming to temps.
And that's where it differs slightly from the perm space, isn't it? It's the availability to do the job rather than the fit to the organisation is what the client is looking for.
And you know what I would say as well, Brian, on that, you have to have the candidate who'll want to do the job and commit to it. So it's about you putting there's no point representing a candidate who's a third round for a permanent interview stage. It's knowing the candidate that'll take the role. It's important as well.
Another thing you mentioned was at the end you said about stick with it, which I think is a really interesting phrase because it takes time to build a temp desk.
Yes, it does.
Put a timeline on building a successful temp desk, because I think to be interesting for the audience to understand, you could be looking at 12 to 18 to 24 months before you start building a really healthy recurring income desk.
You could. I think that really does depend on the area. But you're absolutely right. It can take up to 12 months to get kind of up to kind of that 10, 15, 20 temp and contractor space. But what you will find within that time as well, you're going to have peaks and troughs. So you're going to have what we call temp to perm. So you will have that opportunity to get your once-off fees as well. And what you can do with a temp desk, you can really work off it, because once you get your workers up to a certain space, I would say like maybe kind of 60% of them are often offer permanent roles in the businesses that they're there. So there's your permanent fee. So yes, it does take time, but once you have it done, I would say kind of 12 months. You'd need to kind of really stick at it for 12 months, being realistic.
Great, and that's really useful, because it's 12 months for the consultant to stick at it, but also for the business to have invested in it and not expect that quick return. So
yeah, but once it's up and running, the return is massive.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jean.
No
And
problem.
again, just to reiterate, if people have questions, pop it into the Q&A piece. Moving to Stephen, and Stephen's going to talk to us about the contractor space. Stephen, over to you.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks, Jean. I think you've taken half of what I was planning.
Sorry.
But listen, I think it's a good opportunity to build on what you've said there, because there is a distinctive differential between the temp desk and daily rate contracting. A few things I'll go into, maybe the elements of what makes a successful contract recruiter in a moment. But I think if we look at the business side of things, you mentioned in terms of, say, payrolling as an element within temping and the temp desk and building a temp desk, that isn't the same sort of scenario when it comes to daily rate contractors. The vast majority of the time, you will want them set up as a limited. In fact, you'll always want them set up as a limited company contractor, but they'll either have their own limited company or they'll be utilizing a service such as Contracting Plus. And that's where a partnership with someone like Contracting Plus or the various accountancy firms is essential, because they will actually help you to build your contract desk. They will help you to understand your market when you start out. And if you are just starting out, it's really important that you can understand that, because when you talk to contractors, or if you're talking to permanent people who have potentially hit a VR patch and are looking to move into the world of contracting, they need your guidance, they need your help, and that's what they rely on. They come looking for somebody who has an expertise in this area. And if you can build that understanding and that expertise and give them the confidence and the comfort that it's okay to go contracting, and that, you know, it's not the precarious environment that some of them feel it is, and that doesn't mean it's not without risks, but those risks are very well rewarded on the flip side in terms of the daily rates that they can earn as a contractor. So being able to engage with somebody like Contracting Plus is very important, and have them as a partner, genuinely as a partner, and to help you through that at the start. As an individual, I think proactivity is key to building a good contract desk. We work, you know, in the IT and the business change space, but I think it doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you want to be a strong contract recruiter, you have to be proactive. That means first to market with the job when your client gives it to you. That comes down to a couple of things. You got to build a relationship with your client so you're getting the job first. You don't want a contract job that's 3-4 days old. And for a permanent role, that might be one thing. You know, you got 3-4 days, it's not the worst, maybe. Contract, if our guys don't have a contract role sewn up in 3 or 4 days, you'd be disappointed, you know. So being able to be first to market, as you say, Jean, having that hot list of candidates, that comes from experience and that comes from sticking with it. So you got to stick with it to build the experience and build a network of candidates, to know who are the good people out there, and from that then be able to get on the phone to them as quickly as possible and get them covered off for your role. But you know, you are selling yourself ultimately with clients. You are selling yourself, you're selling your expertise, you're selling your knowledge of the market, and that's key in terms of them having the belief and the trust in you, because it is different than when you sign up to a PSL. You sign up to a PSL, it's your company that are brought on board. They are the ones, it's the reputation of your organization that signed up to a PSL. A contract desk is very much about the individual. Of course, there's a reputational element from the company that you're working with. Of course, there's, you know, what's your experience in the market? How long have you been around? Can you sustain the costs that are involved in running a contract book and a contract desk for an organization? Because it can be very pricey. You know, if you're looking at an average contractor at 500 or 600 euros a day plus margin, you know, that's 18-20 days. You're looking at 12 grand, maybe 14-15 grand a month per person. If you build a desk of you know, 20-30 contractors, you know, you're up to a substantial cost there for the organization. Now, as Jean pointed out, the rewards are great. You can earn some really good margins from daily rate contracting, but you have to have a business that supports you and that is willing to set aside some capital in order to build that desk, because it does take time and it does take funds to be able to do that. Knowing your USP is key as well. as a contract recruiter. I do believe that. I think knowing what you bring, and when you're talking to a client, being able to show them what you offer as their number one recruiter compared to the competition is key. Because if if you're doing some business development, and you tend to be dealing with hiring managers rather than HR teams, it's very rare that a HR team is getting involved in daily rate contracting. It's normally a hiring manager. In our case, it's a CIO, an IT director, a head of change, whatever it might be at that level. For various different industries, it will be the head decision makers in those areas, but they tend to be on the ground. And they want to know that you know your stuff, so having a USP and being able to show them what you bring that others don't, and being able to show them that you have a knowledge of the industry, about their organization, what's going on in the industry, what current market rates are, and you need to be on top of your rates, your margins, and the elements around sort of I suppose what's in demand. So if you're talking to a CIO and they're saying, well, listen, where's the market strong at the moment? And you're saying, oh, listen, it's really tough to find, IT project managers at the moment, and they're getting inundated with, when you try and bluff your way through it, and they're being inundated with IT project manager CVs from other agencies. They're thinking, this person isn't aware of what's going on in the market. They don't know their market, and that can lead to a lack of trust in those areas. So that's one of the key things I would say. Jean, you alluded to it, but knowing your book is key. People forget that every renewal is just as good as a placement, so being on top of your contract book, knowing your contractors, getting to know where they're at. Are they enjoying their time? Are they running into problems? Are they, it's coming 2 months out from their renewal. Are you speaking to them and seeing what their situation is? Have their plans changed? Are they moving away? If you know that they plan to not renew 2 months in advance, you can have your candidates lined up, to call the manager 4 weeks out and say, listen, we're speaking to X, doesn't look like they're going to stay on, don't know if they've had a chat with you, but I've got 3 great people that could step into that role. They've worked with me before, I've screened them and worked with them, or whatever it might be. But being able to offer that comfort to a client and not have to put them through an interview process. You also don't give your competition the opportunity to get in and potentially fill that role, and that's a key piece to sustaining a modest or strong contract book, because people can get a run of luck, and you can place 8 or 10 contractors or 15 contractors in a short period of time, and you think, brilliant, I'm a super contract recruiter now. I've got this nailed down. It's all ahead of me. And all of a sudden you get a call from a client that says, listen, this project is finishing up in 4 weeks, and 80 of your people are finishing up. And it can be, I've seen it happen when people start out in contract. Yeah, no one likes that call, Gene. No one likes that call, but it can be soul destroying for somebody who hasn't built themselves a pipeline and hasn't got themselves mentally prepared for the ups and downs of contract recruitment. Because it is we all know what it's like to get a call on a Friday evening from a candidate who tells you they're not starting on a Monday morning after a 2 month or 3 month notice period, and you want to go and have a chat with them. but in terms of the contract side of things, it can be that multiplied by 5, 10, 15, depending on how programs and projects are being spun up and spun down. So knowing what's going on within your clients and being on top of that, knowing what's going on with your candidates is just as important. Because as I say, if you've got a 6 or 12 month contract, every time they renew, barring an unfortunate fallout, it's just as good as a brand new deal. And you've not had to do any of the work ultimately. You keep a relationship going, but you've not had to go out and slog it out with 2, 3, 4 other agencies to place people in those roles. And Brian, I'm mindful on time here, so I don't mind picking up some other stuff on Q&A, but I do know Jen obviously wants to come in. You wanted to leave some time for Q&As. The one thing I would say on visas, just very briefly, is it is a little bit different again in the daily rate contracting space, because anybody outside of a stamp 4 and a stamp 1G is not going to be able to work in an IT contracting capacity, or sorry, in a daily rate contracting capacity. So being mindful of how long people have left on their stamp 1G. The last thing you want to do is put a contractor in who has 4 or 5 months or even 7 months into a 6 month contract, and the client has no hope of being able to renew them. So just be careful on that with your visas. Obviously, a stamp 4, it's no different than anybody with an EU passport, so they have full rights to work. And there's less of a, as you said, Brian, there's 77% of people are career contractors. So, you know, if you get into this market, you'll get to know these people and you'll work with them again and again. And if you build a strong reputation with them, they will come back to you. They will. You know, we have a group of contractors that almost don't go to other agencies. They just come back to Otis because they worked through us 4, 5, 6, 7 times over the years, and they might come to us and one other. But it is rare that a contractor from the daily rate side transfers over into a perm role, unless they previously had a perm background, maybe took up a couple of contracts and wanted to go back into the perm space. And the other thing I would say is to people, just be mindful of contractors who have continuously bounced. You know, if somebody's lasting 3, 6 months, wherever they are continuously, there's probably a reason for that, and just be careful of it. You know, you need to set yourself up for success. If you're going to do this, and stick with it. As Jean finished off by saying stick with it, I would say so too. It takes time. I would say more than 18 months to build a strong contract recruitment desk that you can actually stand over and that has resilience to it, you know.
Brilliant. Stephen, thank you very much. I have a couple of questions, and there's some questions coming through the Q&A, which we'll get to after Jennifer. Yeah. But a couple of observations. My experience over the last number of years that recruitment has become a bit transactional. We've lost the skill and the art of being consultants and being consultative, either with clients or with candidates. If you're in a contractor or indeed or a temp desk, it's the core nuance of why we all got into recruitment. It's that combination of you're acting as a consultant, a business expert, a business advisor. People are trusting you with jobs, with earnings, with career and career pathways. It's based on relationship. As you say, you have relationships with your contractor book, you have a relationship with your hiring managers, because HR tend not to be involved. Mm-hmm. That becomes a more fruitful relationship than trying to work with HR people, because they're dealing with so many other agencies. Whereas if you build a relationship with the HR manager, it tends to be more meaningful. It's the tenacity piece, it's the USP piece, it's the commercial knowledge and the commercial nuance and how to influence. So is that what excites you about a contract desk, that it's the combination of all of those things rather than just being somewhat transactional?
Yeah, absolutely. But I love the interaction with the client and with the candidate, and feeling like I suppose that there's an element of a deal maker in it, if you know what I mean by that, in terms of you are answers. It's so fast paced. That's what I genuinely love about it. So we're a little bit different. We don't have verticals in Olis. So, you know, I work permanent and contract recruitment, but predominantly contract because of the speed at which it turns around. So you can engage in a process, be full on with it, get it done, and have somebody placed in a matter of 2 or 3 days, compared to the length of time it can take to set up people's diaries. You know, there's an element whereby you want to work with a client whereby they understand the timeframes involved as well. And you're saying, listen, if I'm going to put everything else aside and work on these roles for you now, I need to have an agreement from you. You come back to me within 24 hours on CVs. We have interviews the following day or the day after that. In fact, give me some slots now in your diary on Monday and Tuesday next week that we can preempt. So there's that side of it. Yeah, I love the speed of it. But also, I also love the engagement that you get from it. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. There was a question that came through in advance. Need more clarity about an umbrella company. I know we'll touch this with Jen as well, but can you just give a brief explanation of what an umbrella company is and how it might operate in the contractor space?
Watch Jen. Her eyes will roll as I attempt this now. But
I'll put you on the spot first, and then we'll go to Jen for clarifying.
Yeah, okay. An umbrella company is ultimately a pre-established limited company that the likes of Contracting Plus will have. So, you know, Brian Hyland decides he wants to be an IT contractor tomorrow, and I've got him a job. Congratulations, Brian. And I'll say to you, listen, you've got 2 options here. You either set up your own limited company, or you can go the umbrella route. Now, to be honest with you, the vast majority of the time now, I advise people, if they don't already have a limited company, to go the umbrella route, because a lot of the benefits that were there maybe 10, 12 years ago, 15 years ago as a limited company director of your own limited company are gone. They're not there. You don't have the ability to, you know, write off your trip to you know, Mauritius as a company expense. In fact, I think it was actually somebody that wrote off their honeymoon that put the kibosh on it for everybody when revenue picked it up many years ago. But ultimately, an umbrella company is a pre-established company that allows an umbrella company, or sorry, an accounting firm like Contracting Plus to manage the entire process for you. So they will be involved in, you know, you upload your time to them. They'll manage the timesheet process. They'll send the invoice to the recruitment agency. They will pay you into your personal account, because as a contractor you cannot be paid into your own personal account. You have to be paid into your limited company account and then transfer the money across. So they offer that process. They also do your taxes at the end of the year. So when I'm going through the multiple benefits of having an umbrella company, the other thing I say to them is revenue are forever changing what their legislation is and what they want from people. If you own your own limited company, that liability falls with you. It's up to you to understand what revenue changed. They're not going to come and tell you. You're responsible for this. You're meant to be a business owner, not just an individual, ultimately, in their eyes. So from an umbrella company point of view, that falls back to Contracting Plus, and it's their responsibility to keep on top of what's happening with revenue or any changes that are made in the legislation. And then they will bring them to you and explain to you, okay, these are the changes that are happening. This is what it's going to make a difference for you, positively or negatively. But at least you've got somebody has your back ultimately, and they take all the. I say to contractors, you go and do what you're good at. Let them do what they're good at, you know, and it makes life easier for you.
Great, thank you. Another question.
How did I do, Jen?
Great answer, Stephen. Great answer. I think you touched on all the right points. I think from, you know, an umbrella company perspective, what's also good to know is that it's really, really quick to set up. You have all the insurances in place. So if you are working with clients where there's urgency, which, as you've talked about, there often is on the contract side, an umbrella company, like with the likes of ourselves, we can have company details for a contract within an hour. That person is insured. They can start invoicing same day if needed. And I suppose for the individual as well, I think an umbrella company allows me to start that contracting journey. If I'm coming from a permanent position, you know, and this is where we get a lot of questions, is how do you encourage candidates in permanent positions to look at contracting for the first time? I find that an umbrella company, because there's so much support, because it's so easy, because it's so quick, because it's step in, step out, I'm insured, I'm covered, it's a much easier transition than the thoughts of setting up your own limited company and your own business, even though we still do it all for them. It's just that perception of kind of getting the next step covered. And we have all the insurances, they set it up for free. It's very, very easy. So I think probably about 80% of the people we speak to on a weekly basis start with an umbrella company.
Great. Well done. We'll come back to the questions, Stephen, that are there for you at the tail end. As Jen had started into her piece, we'll continue straight to Jen. So over to you.
Thanks, Brian. I think Stephen and Jean have covered so much of it. But I think contracting does offer a lot of benefits. It offers benefits to you guys in terms of widening talent pools and going to clients with additional solutions, creating recurring opportunities. It offers benefits to your clients in terms of scalability, agility, the fact that they can kind of, I suppose, respond to the market, respond to the project demands. They can get access to that top talent. And then it also offers a lot of benefits to candidates. So I suppose the piece really, the takeaway for me is that contracting offers a lot of really good opportunities for people. And I suppose in thinking about today and what I might share and what I often get asked about, I think one of the key things I get asked about all the time is how do I encourage a candidate to consider a contract opportunity, you know, especially if they're a permanent or have been, you know, working as a permanent employee. And there's so many benefits that I could talk about. There's the fact that they get paid a higher rate of pay. There's the flexibility in how and when and where you work. There is career control. But I think it always comes back to, and what Stephen talked about there and Jean also mentioned, was understanding your candidates. You know, it's all about their motivations and asking really good questions so that you can understand why they're making that next move. So for example, I spoke with a contractor there a couple of weeks ago, really highly skilled individual, highly experienced. The next step for her is to move into management and leadership, and she has absolutely no interest. She's very, very good at what she does. She doesn't want to manage people. So contracting offers her that opportunity maybe to take a bit of a sidestep and try something different and continue to kind of experience new environments and new challenges without maybe that traditional career path. I had another contractor on the flip side, a very young engineer who basically is looking to build as much experience as possible in the next 5 years. So the 5-year plan for him is work with as many different teams, as many different softwares, as many different projects as I can in the shortest period of time so that I can make myself really attractive from an employment perspective and profitable. So his motivation, I mean, while the rates are great and we can talk about the financial benefits, his motivation is actually all about gaining experience and upskilling. So I think it's really knowing the candidate and what it is that's going to motivate them to move. So good questions. And I suppose to follow on from that, one of the things that I would look at then is the flip side of that, you know. So if you know somebody's motivations for making a move, it's also really helpful to understand what might make them not make that move. And so when it comes to kind of objections or hurdles that you might have with candidates, I think a large part of it comes back to that fear of the unknown. Totally understandable. I've never done contracting. You're now talking to me about a limited company. This sounds terrifying. Where do I go from here? It's an understandable reaction. And, you know, it's a big part of why we exist, I think, in terms of just the peace of mind and the reassurance that we bring. So much of what we do is we explain how contracting works, and we explain how simple it is to do. And I think really we give people the reassurance that this is what people are doing. This is what your peers are doing. Setup is quick and easy and free, as I've said. So that would be probably one of the other things I would say is understanding the motivations people have, and then also potentially what might stop them from taking the contract role. And mortgages is and has been, I don't think I've had a conversation in the last 4 years where somebody hasn't mentioned the word mortgage. It is one of those big hurdles, I think, that exists, especially when people are looking at self-employment or contracting for the first time. And I think a large part of that is because there's so many myths out there. I can't get a mortgage if I'm a contractor. I have to contract for a minimum of 3 years. You know, there's so many misconceptions. So contractors can and do get mortgages all the time. That would be a key takeaway. We last year we have an in-house mortgage broker, Mortgage Navigators, and they are absolutely inundated, which is fantastic. With so many people who are now being successful in getting the right advice, going contracting, getting a mortgage, being able to get through that application, and then the successful kind of drawdown. So those are probably the motivators, and then maybe some of the hurdles that you'd come across with candidates. As Stephen said, it's so fast paced, it moves so quickly. So getting everything set up from the right way from the beginning is incredibly important. You know, and Stephen mentioned it, but ensuring that your contract talent is engaged through a limited company is so important. So the contract needs to be with the limited company. The limited company has insurances. You pay the limited company. The limited company pays the tax over to the revenue. So it really protects everybody, really. It protects your client, it protects you, it protects your candidate. And I suppose it also offers people a lot of good financial benefits. So having a limited company means that you can claim business expenses. You know, people are working from home, people are working in a hybrid capacity. If you need to set up a home office, you have the ability to claim some of those home office expenses through your limited company. You can set up really tax efficient pensions. As a contractor, huge motivator for a lot of senior candidates actually to go contracting, where they've hit that level of earnings where they're now just looking to really bulk out their pension. And there's some fantastic options there. So we've an in-house advisory team that will go through that with the contractors as well. So I think in terms of the setup, I don't want to get too much into the detail. I mean, I'm happy to answer questions if people want to know the ins and outs of different limited companies and umbrella companies. But I think like the key thing is actually, don't worry. That's where we come in. You know, we can come in, we can speak to a candidate, we can make it easy. We'll look after all of your onboarding and compliance documents and teams and get all those things checked off as well. So we're here really to kind of make it easy for the candidates and for you guys.
Fabulous. Thanks, Jennifer. Great takeaway, great advice. I think it's really interesting when you look at the sophistication of the US, the UK, even the Australian contractor market. We're not there yet. But you've touched on some of the key barriers that seem to exist at the moment, that fear of security, that fear of career pathway, that fear of being able to secure a mortgage. And with your help and with what you're doing in the market space, I think it's educating the market more.
Yes.
So there's a question behind my statement is, how do we continue to educate the market so that contractors aren't as afraid as there's a reluctance there at the moment, number one. Number two, how do you think the contract market is going to evolve over the next couple of years?
So to your first question, I suppose I think information is really key. So Ireland's project economy, some of the stats we mentioned earlier around, the fact that organisations have 10% of their workforce as contractor talent, the fact that the blended workforce is here. We know that almost 80% of contractors are career contractors. A lot of that information actually comes out of Ireland's project economy, which is a report by Trinity College and that we sponsor. And I suppose really the motivation for that is to get independent research into the sector. Because as you say, Brian, look, Ireland is not where the US or the UK are in terms of kind of having that information around the sector as a whole. So that report is great from allowing us to understand, what's happening in the sector. So where is the talent? What are the average, lengths of contracts that clients are offering? What are the clients' concerns about engaging contract talent? What are candidate motivations? So if people are looking for information and doing that first research piece that Stephen mentioned, to show up with your clients with information, I think doing the research, knowing your industry, that report's a great help, I suppose, in terms of trying to get some more independent advice. I think as well, asking really good questions. You're not going to know what candidates are concerned about and worried about and what fears they have and what misconceptions they've heard unless you have those conversations. So the only way for us to educate people and give that information is to have that conversation with them. The second question you asked me, I think, was about where do I see the contracting market going? Yep. I mean, obviously, I'm going to be completely positive about this. I would love to see it grow and grow and grow. I do think that genuinely, I do think that people in work has changed so much in the last couple of years. We have so much flexibility, whether that be hybrid roles, whether that be the way that people work, whether it be where people work. So I do think that flexibility lends itself really well to contracting and project-based work. I also think the talent wants to be engaged in a challenging, interesting environment. People aren't, certainly in my experience, and if I even think about my peer groups, people aren't looking at the next 30 years. People are looking at the next 2 years. So having an interesting and engaging and challenging opportunity in front of you, again, if that's your motivation, if you're looking to kind of upskill, contracting, lends itself so well to that. So we'd be positive about where the market's going, definitely.
Great. Fabulous. Thank you so much. Jean, Stephen, and Jen, thank you all for your pieces. We have a few questions now. So in terms of candidate sourcing, especially immediate candidates, what's the best place to source? LinkedIn Recruiter doesn't have a function to indicate someone is immediate. Often when advertising, perm candidates will apply and a lot of time is spent speaking to them when at the end they're not open to or suitable to temp work that need a quick turnaround. Any advice on the best way to build your hot list of temp candidates? So that applies to Jean and Stephen.
Yeah, again, I think it's about educating candidates. You will see, and it's about kind of really delving into the CVs. Like, for example, you'll see people are coming to the end of training contracts or coming to the end of a contract role, or quite often on somebody's CV, it could be incorrect. Like, I quite often would speak to a candidate that might have, say, 2021 to present, but they've actually finished, so they don't always represent themselves as to being available immediately. And that's where your due diligence will come into play. So it's really about kind of getting under the bonnet with the candidate. Are you available? Would you consider? But I think it's that education piece, going back to what Jen says. It's really like it's taking it away. Like temping is a little bit different. Well, temp contract, temping is obviously it's PAYE based, so that's kind of the main difference. But even taking that phrase out of it, you have to say to a candidate, you're going to get diverse experience. Like, we'd work with a lot of newly qualified accountants. So if you go 6 months into a pharma company, that's fantastic experience. You're going to get that onto your CV. You may get to implement a system, etc. So I suppose, to put it in a nutshell, you have to believe that it's the best solution. If you're bought into it and you genuinely believe that this is a good option for these people, you can convey that in your consultative pitch with them. But yeah, I would say it's about delving into candidate CVs. You'll find a lot of people mightn't have their actual dates are correct, etc. And you find people, don't assume that people who are in a permanent role won't be open to a contract. We've worked with a lot of people who've moved out of permanent roles for contracts.
Might seem a bit obvious. Ask them. Ask them are they available for temporary contract work.
That's it, yeah. And not, I assume you wouldn't look. You know, you have to, yeah. I've heard that, yeah. It's about, we have an opportunity here. Is this something you would consider? It's all about how you present it, you know, and it can absolutely lead to longer term opportunities for people. And I'd say flip side, on the client side, you need to educate the clients too. Like I've recruited temp and contract roles, and clients have gone, oh, but they've jumped around in their CV, or they've had too many temp roles. So you have to be really kind of firm when you're talking, but they've kept themselves employed, particularly throughout COVID. Like, it's impressive if somebody has 3 to 4 6-month contracts on their CV, they kept working. So you have to kind of be able to push back, and negotiation is a massive part of temp and contracting. So you have to be strong with that.
I agree completely. It's interesting how we present it as consultants is really important. I in the past I've heard people say, you know, this is only a temp role, or you know, this is only a which belittles it from the outset. So now you're scrambling in order to convince them to go forward. Whereas if you're positive about it, proactive about it, then you're presenting the benefits rather than presenting it in a negative light in any way.
You should be comfortable. I think you should be confident. Yeah.
I think there's another side to it as well, guys. Because if we look at what our audience is today, it's consultants looking to understand it a little bit more. It's important for them to look at the why and the cost as well. And what I mean by that is, you know, don't be afraid to ask somebody if they're coming to you with a very strong permanent background, now asking about contracting. You need to understand why they're asking that, right? And what's the motivation behind why they want to go contracting? Because, and I bring the cost in there, the cost to you can be a hell of a lot more than the cost to them, because it's very easy for a candidate to say, oh yeah, sure, put me forward. You know, sure, I'll go for it. I'll do the interview. And you get through the process. The client loves them and offers them. And then they drag their heels because you haven't looked after the initial phase of informing them and making sure they're genuinely on board with the idea of contracting. So it's very easy. It can be very hard to gain a client. It can be very easy to lose a client. And that can come from a bad candidate. It can be something that I say you didn't do, but you probably did make the mistake by not qualifying the candidate properly at the start. So, you know, if you're looking at candidates who are looking to move from a permanent perspective into a contract role or into the contract market, just be happy to ask some tough questions. There's nothing wrong with asking tough questions. That's what you're there for. You know, the last 3 or 4 years, no disrespect, during COVID, there's been an element of order taking to recruitment. You know, it's been a lot of sectors, it's been easy. It's been flooding in. And a lot of people who maybe started in that 3 or 4 years haven't yet had those cycles of when it's up and when it's down. So, you know, if you're going to stick at it now over the next 18 months until things improve again, don't be afraid to ask tough questions, and remember, you're there to offer a service to your client, and that's to be the barrier between them and good and bad candidates, you know.
Great advice.
We can always just sorry to say as well, Brian, like, we often get calls from people who are just at that very early stage and they want to understand what contracting is, and they don't, you know, you could be offering them a daily rate of 450 per day and they don't maybe know what that actually looks like as a take-home pay. You know, if you've never contracted before. So we're here to support that as well. So if you do have candidates where you feel like, look, they're saying they're interested, but let's qualify this a little bit more. Let's get them the right information. We'll talk to them at any stage. You know, we can have a quick call and we can explain what it is and give them that kind of reassurance about the rates and reassurance about the take-home pay. So if that's of value, obviously, just to mention that we're happy to do that. They don't have to have a contract. We'll talk to them.
Great. There was a question around the Trinity report. What's that titled again?
Yes.
If someone were to find
Ireland's Project Economy. What I'll do is I'll send it on. There's we're now in, so actually the report is going to come out this April. It'll be in its 4th year. So we've 3 years of information, which is great because obviously now you can start to build those trends. But it's called Ireland's Project Economy. So I'll pop a link actually into the chat box there for anyone. I'll pull it up there now and I'll pop it in if anyone wants to look at it.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
Yeah, it is. I agree. And the more we all contribute to it, the more meaningful it becomes year on year.
Absolutely.
So really good. Stephen, a specific question. What's the average contract margin that recruiters seem to be working at currently? Very specific question, but share what you can.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on the client. You know, sometimes you'll be in an MSA where a percentage is set by the client, and you've no choice about it. You either get on board or you're not part of the panel.
Yeah.
The other side of it really depends on the actual day rate of the contractor. So I suppose you're probably looking at somewhere between 12 and 15, 18%. It can really depend on where you're at with the client and what sort of volumes you're receiving from that client as well, you know.
Okay.
I try to be as transparent as possible with my contractors as well, though. You know, I find that has helped over the years. You know, back in the day, you were always worried about them knowing how much money am I making from this. You know, they'll think I'm making. But you know, actually, if you just say to a contractor, listen, this is your cut, that's my cut. The client knows both. We're all in this. You know, there's no major hidden elements to it. I think it's actually, it can be over time a very freeing way of having those conversations around rates, because sometimes when it comes to extension or comes to increases that contractors are looking for, clients are going, well, how much of this is you asking and how much of this is the contractor asking? And I have a habit of not taking extra margin on rate increases as well. So I'll tend to say, listen, the contractor wants 50 quid a day more, it's all going to them. They're getting the whole lot, just so we're clear on this.
Very good, and it is interesting because with temp agreements, they tend to be fixed rates. The rates are agreed. There are standard terms of business or the PSL rates that have been agreed. There's a bit of flexibility with the contractor, but the reality is, if you're looking to build a long-term contract desk, you got to put them first, not us. It's not a short-term business.
You have to cover your costs. So that's the other thing I would say, Brian. And I've seen that happen. I've seen some agencies suffer last year, and it was because they maybe got sort of sucked into these large agreements with, you know, I won't label all, you know, multinationals, but sometimes these agreements with multinationals can be very cumbersome and not very profitable. You know, the amount of time and effort and the amount of demands that they have for very low margins can sound great if you're getting volume, but you nearly sell your soul to that company. And when they make a decision at a higher level, maybe outside of Ireland, that impacts your entire contract book, and all of a sudden a company can be in trouble. So, you know, if you're a contract recruiter, don't necessarily be sort of see everything shiny and think it's, you know, it's beneficial. Study it, make sure it works for you. You've only got so many hours in a day. Make sure that those hours work for you and that you're actually benefiting from it and giving a good service to your client. And if you're giving a good service for a client, don't be afraid to charge a fair rate for it as well.
Yeah, I think it's an area you can be quite competitive. Like I agree with you on that. You know, you can be outside of PSLs, you can be competitive, and you need to go back to your client and let them know they're only going to be paying for hours worked. You'd often get the objection, "God, that's really expensive if I took on a permanent person," which they obviously can't. So it's really about educating your client on that and bringing it back to rates and margins on the temp side. You have to go by the Agency Workers Directive now. So your rate to your candidate has to be comparable to what they would be paid on a permanent basis. So there's way more transparency, but candidates are really hard to find. So, you know, I think where possible, you know, I certainly would look at pushing competitive margins, you know, and I think it's important for us outside of PSLs.
Good. I'm conscious of time. We've 8 minutes. We've two more questions to get through. So let me read this. It's in the webinar chat. I have a question around FTC 12-month scenario. I'm a daily rate contractor last 6 years. One recent role was insisting on 12-month FTC employee, not daily rate contractor. No interview yet. Our manager is saying he wants FTC employer, not a contract. It's only a 12-month FTC. I can't use an umbrella company for FTC, and I'm only temporary. Ends after 12 months. The advantage for me is the advantage is for the employer, not the employee. Is there a benchmark salary for FTC? Higher than perm, perhaps, as it's not a full perm role. Holidays are paid for FTC. Not sure if they pay pension contribution. FTC isn't so attractive, so don't want to leave contracting or stop existing pension, etc. Stephen, do you want to jump into that?
Yeah, I don't mind picking up on that. Listen, an FTC isn't you know, it's often the worst of both worlds, and I know that can sound terrible, but you don't have the security of a permanent role. You don't have that sort of ability to maybe move within the organization and your time go towards maybe promotion and stuff like that. But you also don't have the financial benefits of a daily rate contract, because you tend to be paid at the same rate, or sometimes even a lower rate than what they would offer for the permanent role. Okay, and I don't think that falls in within what you're saying, Jean. Within the temping space, I don't think the working time directive applies there either. Yeah, so it kind of falls in between two stools. So often an FTC is, a maternity cover, a paternity cover, a long-term illness, where a company doesn't have budget out of their own capex to spend on a daily rate contractor. What they then have to do is take the salary that person is potentially no longer receiving, say they're on a state benefit or something like that, and they've gained 50 or 60K back into their coffers, and they say, okay, we need that position filled for X amount of months. So we're only going to pay a salary and offer the bonus or the pension that goes alongside it. So I would say it's not an attractive proposition for anybody who's a seasoned daily rate contractor, because it is ultimately the worst of both worlds. But sometimes needs must. Sometimes you want to get a role under your belt and just get 12 months, or you like the project or you like the company and you take it. But yeah.
Agreed. Good answer. Final question, just we can finish on time. What's your response to multinationals who won't contract past 11 months and recycle contractors on 11-month contracts? That's both Jean and Steve, I would have thought.
Yeah. Do you want to go, Jean, or do you want me to go?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I have some views on it, and it's been one that's been around for many years, and I've fought many a client over the years on this, because there's a belief that after 11 months that this person will become, a permanent member, or have permanent employment rights, or have a claim against us. That's the whole beauty of the limited company. Okay, they're not even employed by us. They are an employee or a director of a limited company, which is then contracted to us as an agency, who then contract out to that company, that end client, right? So do they change their window cleaner every 12 months or 11 months? No. Do they change their catering company every 11 months? No, they don't. And this has been my argument time and time again with companies. But sometimes it's a HR or a people services division within a company that's deciding on these things, and it really is an interpretation of the law. But in nearly 21 years of being in OLAS, I've not had a single client who's run into a problem with having contractors on site for 5, 6, 7. I have a contractor who's 19 years working for me, and there's not an issue, because everything's done right. And yet again, and I promise Jen is not paying me, having a limited company there in between is the key thing, and it's why it's so important. It's another reason why it's so important.
It's so different. That's
Jean, you have 60 seconds.
On the PAYE side, it's different because you are an employee, so that's where you do obviously gain the rights, and that's why that 11 months does kick in. But that's an interesting take in it, Stephen, for sure, for the contracting side. So they are different between PAYE and contracting limited company.
And bear in mind, it's okay to have a different opinion to your client. That's what consulting is about. You're the expert. Back yourself to give. You won't always win all the battles, but at least you're showing yourself to be an expert. So
I lost loads of them, Brian.
We all do. Absolutely. I'm sure we lose some today, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So by way of wrap up, before I give my thanks, the title of the session was 7 Essential Tips, my 7R, speed of response, be proactive, manage your pipeline, starters, finishers, make sure the business is invested in establishing a temp or a contract desk, because you can't do it in isolation. Make sure that you're sharing information with contractors so they understand the reality versus the perception with regard to mortgages, job security, career pathway, etc. Be consultative and build relationships. They're my 7 takeaways. So to Jean, Stephen, Jennifer, hugely informative. Thank you so much. To those who attended, thank you. I hope we got around to answering your questions. If we haven't, please do reach out either through Anna or others, and we'll get back to you individually for anything. But really great session. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks
Brian.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Thanks, Jean. Thanks, Jen.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.